I cannot get rid of a pattern because the pattern is my intelligence. I don't want to get rid of my liver. I cannot get rid of a pattern either. It's the same thing. The pattern is my intelligence.
Welcome to Point of Relation with Thomas Hübl, a podcast that illuminates the path to collective healing at the intersection of science and mysticism. This is the Point of Relation.
Trauma means that I take a loan from the future, from my future. And then some people ask, okay, what do I mean when I say, what kind of loan do we take? And so what I mean by that is that I need to use more energy in that moment. So I take a loan to go through a very overwhelming experience or a series of overwhelming experiences or chronically overwhelming experiences. In a way, I take a loan so that I have the energy to deal with that situation. But what I do is, from that moment on, I'm stepping out of my inner coherence flow. When we talk about the Wu Wei Wu in the Tao Te Ching, like that my movement or the master's action arises naturally from his or her core. It's not that there's inactivity. No, it's an authentic arising of action out of the movement. And when we respond to somebody talks to me, and I respond to the person, for this I need to receive the person, receive the world in your arms. What does it mean, receive? That basically all my levels of development are listening, because that's the complexity of my nervous system today. All my levels of development are listening, and then from my core there's an answer, which means I can host you inside myself. I can feel you in my body. I can feel you in my emotions. I can co-think with you. I can be inspired or creative, and I feel you feeling me. I'm related. But when that information hits trauma areas, so an enormous stress gets activated, and the part of me that is numb. And so when at the moment of the dissociation, I take a lot of energy to dissociate inside, to fragment the part of myself in order to go through that overwhelming situation. But life will constantly call me back to take care of that. And so from the moment that I have that unintegrated stress or that chronically unintegrated attachment stress or anything that happened that was a more severe traumatization in my life, I cannot operate anymore on a regular level of regulation. And if that regular level of regulation means burning as much fuel as I need, when I burn chronically more fossil fuels, like more fuel in my body than I have, I cannot live anymore sustainably. And that's why I often say that living sustainably is not just like ecological work, is not just an external question. It's an internal question, how I live with the energy balance in my own body, and to get to know the parts of myself that are chronically hyperactivated because I don't know many of those places. I find out through life. And there is a lovely quote in the Tao. Every being in the universe is an expression of the Tao. It springs into existence, unconscious, perfect, free, takes on a physical body, and lets circumstances complete it. It takes on a physical body and lets circumstances complete it. That is why every being spontaneously honors the Tao. The Tao gives birth to all beings, nourishes them, maintains them, cares for them, comforts them, protects them, takes them back into itself. Creating without possessing. Acting without expecting. Guiding without interfering. That is why the love of the Tao is in the very nature of things. So, creating without possessing, acting without expecting, guiding without interfering. That is why the love of the Tao is in the very nature of things. So the very interesting part why I read this is that, and let circumstances complete it. That karmically, the internal and the external experiences are connected, of course. So what we go through in life in order to complete our body, when we integrate our traumatic events, we get to know them, usually our trauma areas, we get to know through difficult situations or things that don't work. We don't get to know them through the parts that are anyway flowing. So all the parts in me that are anyway flowing, they don't produce questions. So I don't hold a question in the part that is flowing. I hold questions in the parts that create turbulences. So I meet a person and the interaction is difficult. I have a challenging life situations. There's a crisis in my life. There's a crisis in the world. And this relates also to a question that somebody posted. Ego, you said we don't need to get rid of the ego. I'm not sure why. And that's a very interesting question, I think, to discuss a little bit the nature of the ego. Because when we look in the mystical science, we say there is space, like witnessing and consciousness and awareness. There's energy, and energy forms a structure. And now it's very important what each and every one of us understands when we use the word ego. When you look, what's your definition of ego? Which parts of you do you put into the bucket of ego? And that part needs to disappear. And which parts of you do you like enough that you don't put them into the bucket of ego? So when you're compassionate, is this your ego or is this not your ego? When you have a loving moment, would you say you're in your ego or you're not in your ego? Is all of this your ego or none of it? So when we look, because it's a word that's so often used, but I think we sometimes lack a common understanding of what ego means. So that's one thing. And then we are lacking an understanding of what we do with the ego, or who is the one who is doing that. So what is the part in me that thinks I should get rid of the ego? And maybe that's not your thought pattern, so then it's anyway not relevant. But often the term ego goes hand in hand with our inner conditioning and the split parts of ourselves. That some people say, oh, I'm in my ego when I'm angry, or I'm in my ego when I feel envy. But I'm not in my ego when I feel loving, and I'm not in my ego when I feel compassionate. So is that the definition of ego? Like a kind of a splitting of certain qualities in myself? Some that I like and some that I don't like? Or are we looking at what are the embodied parts that can channel light in a way that do not create resistances in order to create a separate sense of self? I'll say this again. Or are we talking about open channels that energize structures of consciousness that have been created over millions of years? And because they are open, the flow doesn't express itself as a sense of separation. So if an embodied spirituality, which reminds me of, I wanted to say something also about the master has no mind of her own. She works with the mind of the people. She's good to people who are good. She's also good to people who aren't good. This is true goodness. And then she trusts people who are trustworthy. She also trusts people who aren't trustworthy. And this is true trust. I'll finish here. It continues, but I finish here. One thing is certain, that everything is changing, which is not always comfortable, because habits need to change, traumas need to open to give birth to a new version of ourselves. But our souls are calling us, and the global soul, the soul of our world, is calling us constantly to move and to mature, to evolve. And wisdom and maturity, I believe, are the capacity to relate and stay related to the challenge as much as it's possible, and turn the challenge into that growth movement. And we are not the first ones that are going through challenging times, and that wisdom of the former generations lives in us. And it needs to be activated, it needs to be connected to. And also our spiritual capacities. We have a lot of spiritual capacities that we often don't use because nobody taught us, but they're available to everybody. And that's why I believe practicing in a community is powerful. We are creating over 5 months a collective ritual of healing and growth and transformation. So our 5-month course is composed out of many, many elements. Of course, there are teaching elements, there are practices in the main course sessions that we go through. There are, of course, mentor sessions, there are bonus materials, there are live process sessions. Many people are in this transition phase. We are going from something to something new, and we don't know exactly what that is. It's a new commitment to trust the intelligence of life and the intelligence of our souls, that we know that we are on a path.
This November, join Thomas Hübl for the Path of the Courageous Soul, a 5-month online intensive to transform trauma into wisdom, fulfill your purpose, and navigate uncertain times for personal and collective evolution. To learn more and enroll in the course, visit the link in this episode's show notes or go to thepathofthecourageoussoul.com.
She trusts people who are trustworthy, and she also trusts people who aren't trustworthy. For many people, that creates a kind of a paradox or like a contradiction, because we often make our trust dependent on the outside. You say, oh, you are trustworthy, that's why I trust you, and you're not trustworthy, that's why I don't trust you. So it seems like at first that my trust depends on you. But when we look closer, then we see, oh, wait a moment. Trust is an inherent capacity to be related. And not trusting is a function of protection. That's why when somebody says, I don't trust you, that's very authentic as long as we don't believe it's about the other person. And I don't have to trust you because the remedy of trust is not trust. We cannot heal something when we try to do the opposite. So if I don't trust you, I have the feeling I don't trust you, or I feel withdrawn, then the answer is not to be open or to be connected. The answer is consciously to get to know the mechanism that needs pulling away, because that was better than staying open. And I think what we often do, we hear this very often in the spiritual fields and in the also the whole self-development area. We hear two things, that either we are in the part that says, I don't trust you because you're not trustworthy, or we're in the part, we trust everybody. We should trust everybody. Everybody is trustworthy. Everybody is lovable. Yeah, but without body. That's an idea, or compassion. Sometimes it's compassion. No, that's not compassion. That's an idea of compassion. It has nothing to do with compassion. Because as long as I didn't integrate the parts of me that don't like people, that get really angry and pissed and frustrated and envy, or feel envy, that as long as I experience that and I don't respect it, I will not develop compassion. Because compassion is an embodied process. It's not a disembodied process. Oh, I love everybody. No, you don't. Because love happens when we are specific, not general. Love is specific, not general. And we see this very often in intimate relationships. We might be with our partner as he or she could be. And that's not potential orientation. That's a defense pattern, because I cannot be with you who you are. So I want you to be more developed. So that we see, when we start looking at our intimate relationships or our family systems, I would love my parents to be different. Yeah, but they are not. So who am I in relation to the parents that I have? Who am I in relation to the children that I have? Who am I in relation to the intimate partner that I'm with? And so that's one thing. And the other part that expresses this too, that we hear again and again, is I still have that pattern. I know it doesn't happen here in this community, but it happens sometimes. We hear people say that. I still have that pattern. So what did we say? Who is still and who is the pattern? and what's between them. So when you hear yourself say, because I think we all might be in moments when we would wish certain things not to be there, especially after 10 years or 20 years of meditation practice and therapies that we tried out and many things that we did. And then we say, no, I still have that pattern. And in the moment I engage in that, like I engage that sentence in a conversation, intellectually, I'm confirming the person's inner split. Or my own, if I perpetuate that sentence. Because it means that I still have that pattern is the pattern. This is it. Because it says that there's a part of me that is disconnected from the defense system or the defense pattern that I still have that pattern. And instead of learning to get to know myself in that place, I want to get rid of that pattern. But I cannot get rid of a pattern because the pattern is my intelligence. I don't want to get rid of my liver. I cannot get rid of a pattern either. It's the same thing. The pattern is my intelligence. And I didn't put it there because I was stupid. I needed that more in the given circumstances of my family, the education system, the society that I grew up in. I needed that pattern more than something else. And I think it's very important because as long as the pattern is not me, there won't be any change. I'm not getting rid of an it. That's why I often say, everybody who says, I have a muscle tension in my back, there's a muscle tension, or I have a tension in my shoulders, nobody can ever relax a tension. I can only relax when I feel I'm tightening the muscles of my neck. It's an action, not an it. As long as it appears to me as an it, I'm looking at it through a dissociation. It's a dissociated part of myself. So that's why it can't change, because I'm looking through it as if I want to touch a person, but then I find out that between me and the person is glass. It looks like I could touch the person, but there's a perfectly polished glass. That's why I cannot relax the muscles of my lower back, because I don't feel it. I'm contracting because I'm managing a lot of attachment fear. And as long as I don't get to the part of myself where holding my attachment fear is so intelligent for a 1-year-old that has been neglected, it's so scary to be alone that I did the best to care for myself. And today I want to get rid of the childhood hero. And that doesn't work. The only thing that I can do is to honor the childhood hero and make it my friend. And in the moment it's my friend, it will work for me. Which means it can be updated. It can be brought into this moment. If not, then it will operate in my disconnected past. And I wanted to relate to all of those questions because they're all interrelated. They're all interrelated because often people identify themselves as the ego structure that is all the things that are difficult or the things that we don't like. Basically, our shadow world is being put into the bucket of ego, and our bright world is being put into the bucket of consciousness or whatsoever. And then the one part wants to get rid of the other part. But like this, I cannot be truly whole. Like this, I will always stay partial. So light, we talked a lot about light. The light of the source being channeled through various higher spiritual levels down through my body as embodied light that flows through the open channels and meridians and energy channels in my body and energizes the structures of consciousness that have been built through integrated history. Millions of years of life, of planet, evolving to the very fact that we are sitting here is a pipe system. That's a huge library. It's a huge library. And every one of us bought personal books. So every one of us has a library at home with the books that fit our intelligence. That's individuality. So part of my nervous system is, of course, personal, but the rest of my nervous system is not personal. It's collective and more. It's hundreds or millions of years of life. And all of it sits here. And then it's presence. There is another quote that I love very much. I will only read parts of it. Or maybe I will read the whole. In the beginning was the Tao. All things issue from it, all things return to it. That's creation. To find the origin, trace back the manifestations. When you recognize the children and you find the mother, you will be free of sorrow. So if you recognize the children and you find the mother, you will be free of sorrow. If you close your mind in judgments and traffic with desire, your heart will be troubled. If you keep your mind from judging and aren't led by the senses, your heart will find peace. And then the sentence that I want to relate to is, seeing into darkness is clarity. Knowing how to yield is strength. Use your own light and return to the source of light. This is called practicing eternity. So use your own light and return to the source of light. This is called practicing eternity. It's a great quote or verse. And as with all sacred texts, every text has multiple layers of understanding. The text doesn't just say what it says when we read it. It has multiple layers, so it deepens and deepens until we come to the level of like the source. And one thing that I want to speak about is seeing into darkness is clarity. Because I often say presence and seeing is the same. Seeing and presence and clarity is the same. So and how does this relate? Why I'm saying this? Because when integrated history is presence, So everything that happened in humanity until today that developed the structures of consciousness that I'm using now to speak and to feel and to sense and to have emotional connection with you, all this is part of presence. It's not that that's outside of presence, and presence is only emptiness. No, emptiness and fullness are both unified in the source. So it's not that I want to get rid of everything and then I'm free. Who got rid of it? So there's subject-object transcendence, maybe, that more and more I can rest the space and witness bigger and bigger parts of life and structures of consciousness as objects that are arising and moving. That's different. It's not that I get rid, I throw one part of myself out of the room and then I'm free. No, I'm not going to be free. I will be partial. And not only that, the idea of ego, getting rid of the ego, perpetuates to abandon the abandoned child even more. That's also very important. So the parts that I already got rid of, that I dissociated from, I would like to get rid of even more because they disturb me today as a grown-up being. It would be much better not to have the fears in my intimate relationship that I have when I have a conflict with my wife or husband. I would be so glad to take all these fears, throw them out of the window, and that's it. And then I'm courageous. Or the other notion that is also like a classic assumption is, I'm just waiting to the day when I will not have any fears anymore. So I'm on the path of enlightenment to be free of fears. That's great, because if that's my understanding of spirituality, then my fear avoidance patterns, they will be very happy because they got a big brother. So not only am I trying not to feel fear, and I sometimes get flooded by it because it comes back. No, now I have the idea that spirituality will free me of my fears. So I will live even less connected to myself than more. What is true is that integration will reduce the amount of past, so that when I integrate fears, the fears that do not fit into this current moment, that are projections from my past onto this moment, will get less. But I need to examine the idea that I have that as a human being, I want to be free of fears. I don't know if that's going to happen. We don't know. That's an assumption. That's not our experience. If that's one day our experience, then that's what it is going to be. But it's not an aim. Because as an aim, I'm very tempted not to be where I am. Not to be real, but to try to be ideal. And then I hang out in the tension and the frustration between the real and the ideal. So if I embrace my ideal self, I can never be my real self, and I will miss the aspiration that makes me grow out of my real self. Aspiration is great. Ideal ideas are frustrating, because I will never be happy with myself. Because I will always be in the ideal version that I can never reach. So there's development is the emergence. Otto Scharmer talks about in the presence there's emergence and there is becoming. There's anyway a drive in all of us, otherwise we wouldn't sit here. There's anyway a drive in all of us to develop. And we heard that call already, otherwise we wouldn't do the things that we do in our life. But that's very different. To listen to that call is different than to compare my inner world to the ideal version of myself. Because that gap is filled with my past. And so when I'm identified with my past, I'm not clear. Presence is seeing, is clarity. Presence means that I'm looking at what's happening right now. And we see it with every interaction. Every time somebody says something that's difficult in his or her life, seeing is not looking into now. Seeing is absorbed, at least partly, by the past. And so when we recognize that, then we more and more can bring our energy into present moment. But that means that I'm not practicing in order to get away from here. I'm not practicing to get away from me or my experience. Getting rid of the ego there's a big danger that I want to get away from life as it is here, which is sometimes understandable given our past, but it's very important that as a community we create more and more a vessel that is safe enough to be who we are. To create a community and a vessel that being who we are is possible because we learn to trust that again. And then we harvest the beauty of what it means to support that in each other. And that's awakening and bringing embodied light into the very moment that is actually happening now. And that is connected to all the history, all the potential future. They meet here and now. But it's different than to live a spiritual life, to get away from here and now. Because like this, I will always stay frustrated because my awakening will always happen in the future. It will never arrive because it cannot arrive.
This episode was recorded during a session of the Mystic Cafe, a global membership community with Thomas Hübl featuring live teachings, meditations, discussions, and Q&A, all taking place online. To learn more or to become a member of the Mystic Cafe, visit www.mysticcafeonline.com.
Thanks for listening to Point of Relation with Thomas Hübl. Stay connected and get updates about new episodes by visiting our website, pointofrelationpodcast.com, and by subscribing to the Thomas Hübl YouTube channel. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share about us with your community on social media. Thank you. We appreciate your support.